Welcome to the Bible Quiz. Tonight we're spotlighting the unsung and unforgettable, midwives and queens, prophets and peacemakers, women of the Old Testament. Expect razor-sharp details, tight choices, and faith checks on courage, wisdom, and covenant loyalty. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and share. Huge congratulations and heartfelt thanks to our 8 faithful companions from the last episode: Sharon Prowse, Diane Howell, Jennifer Harrison, Esmeralda Nell, Janet Bailey, Rosalind Philip Jagadizen, Placide Lubaki, Bing. You keep this community strong. Drop your name in the chat for a chance to be featured next time. Your comments shape future quizzes, sharpen our questions, and help this ministry reach more people. Ready to meet the heroines who moved history with holy wisdom and gutsy faith? Now, let's get started. Question 1. Who judged Israel under the palm and summoned Barak to battle? A. Miriam, B. Huldah, C. Hannah, D. Deborah. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Deborah. Deborah serves as judge and prophetess, delivering God's command to Barak and accompanying him to the field. Judges, chapters 4-5. After Jael ends Sisera, Deborah leads a victory song that credits the Lord, celebrates willing volunteers, and rebukes indifferent tribes. Her leadership blends spiritual discernment, courageous presence, and poetic theology, modeling how God raises women to call hesitant men to faithful action and praise. Question 2. Who vowed, "Where you go, I will go, your God, my God"? A. Ruth, B. Orpah, C. Tamar, D. Naomi. You get 10 seconds. That's a dash Ruth. Ruth binds herself to Naomi with covenant-like language, choosing Israel's God and people over Moabite roots. Ruth, chapter 1, verses 16-17. Her loyal love, Hizd, becomes the hinge for providence, humble gleaning, redeemer Boaz, and lineage to David. The story reframes outsider status as a stage for grace, showing how faithfulness in ordinary choices folds into God's redemptive plan that ultimately points toward the Messiah. Question 3. Which queen risked death by approaching the king uninvited? A. Vashti, B. Jezebel, C. Esther, D. Athaliah. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Esther. Urged by Mordecai, Esther fasts and then steps into the throne room, where a scepter means life or death. Esther, chapters 4-5. She uses wisdom, banquets, timing, exposure of Haman to secure her people's deliverance. The narrative highlights providence without naming God, inviting readers to recognize unseen sovereignty at work. Courage here looks like prepared initiative rooted in communal prayer and a willingness to risk privilege for others. Question 4. Who drove a tent peg through Sisera's temple? A. Jael, B. Michal, C. Abigail, D. Delilah. You get 10 seconds. A. Jael. Sisera flees to Jael's tent. With domestic tools and battlefield nerve, she ends the oppressor's flight. Judges chapter 4, verses 17 to 22. Deborah's song praises Jael, most blessed among women, framing her act as God's decisive strike against Canaanite tyranny. Judges chapter 5. The episode shows deliverance arriving through unexpected agents and spaces, overturning assumed power dynamics. Jael's courage complements Deborah's leadership and Barak's pursuit in a multi-layered victory. Question 5. Which prophetess authenticated the rediscovered law for King Josiah? A. Anna. B. Huldah. C. Miriam. D. Huldah. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Huldah. When the book of the law is found, Josiah's delegation seeks Huldah, who confirms coming judgment yet promises mercy to the repentant king. 2 Kings chapter 22, verses 14 to 20. Her authoritative word sparks sweeping reform, covenant renewal, idolatry purged, Passover restored. Huldah's role underscores how God's voice can come through women to recalibrate national life, aligning leaders and people with Scripture instead of nostalgia or political expedience. If this blessed you, subscribe and share. Help another believer dig deeper. Question 6. Who intercepted David with food and counsel, averting bloodshed? A. Tamar. B. Abigail. C. Rahab. D. Bathsheba. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Abigail. Married to Shirley Nabal, Abigail loads provisions, meets David on the road, and appeals to his calling, steering him from vengeance. 1 Samuel chapter 25. God strikes Nabal. David later marries Abigail. Her wisdom preserves innocent blood and guards David's conscience on the way to kingship. The scene celebrates peacemaking initiative, eloquence anchored in theology, and courageous hospitality that diffuses a crisis with prudence and faith. Question 7. Who were the midwives who feared God and protected Hebrew boys? A. Orpah and Ruth. B. Mahlah and Tirzah. C. Bilhah and Zilpah. D. Shiphrah and Puah. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Shiphrah and Puah. Commanded to kill newborn males, Shiphrah and Puah defy Pharaoh and spare life, offering a wise reply when questioned. Exodus chapter 1, verses 15 to 21. God dealt well with them and multiplied Israel. The narrative frames civil disobedience as holy allegiance when state decrees assault image bearers. These women stand at Exodus's starting line, showing that reverent fear of God, not fear of rulers, midwives' liberation for generations to come. Question 8. Who prayed in anguish for a child and vowed him to the Lord? A. Michal. B. Naomi. C. Hannah. D. Peninnah. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Hannah. Misread by Eli as drunk, Hannah pours out grief and makes a vow. God grants Samuel, whom she dedicates. Her song celebrates reversal, proud, humbled, lowly raised, and previews themes later echoed by Mary. Hannah models an honest lament turned doxology, teaching that God attends to the afflicted and folds their faith into national renewal through the ministry of a child given back to him. 1 Samuel, chapters 1-2. Question 9. Who led Israel's first victory song after the sea crossing? A. Miriam, B. Huldah, C. Hannah, D. Deborah. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Miriam. Miriam the prophetess takes a tambourine, leading women in antiphonal praise. Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Exodus chapter 15, verses 20-21. Her leadership establishes worship as Israel's first public act of freedom, victory interpreted through doxology, not triumphalism. The moment frames deliverance as God's warfare and Israel's singing, teaching a newly redeemed people how to remember and rehearse salvation in community. Question 10. Who hid the spies and tied a scarlet cord in Jericho? A. Jael, B. Rahab, C. Abigail, D. Rahab. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Rahab. Rahab shelters Israelite spies, confesses the Lord's supremacy, and marks her window with a scarlet cord. Her courageous allegiance reverses identity, from Canaanite and harlot to spared ally folded into Israel's story. The rescue extends to her household, modeling how faith risks for others. Her name later appears in royal and messianic genealogy, proof that grace reroots families and futures. Joshua chapter 2, verses 1-21. Question 11. Which royal mother secured the throne for Solomon? A. Michal, B. Jezebel, C. Athaliah, D. Bathsheba. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Bathsheba. With Nathan's counsel, Bathsheba appeals to David to confirm Solomon as king, averting Adonijah's grab. 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 28-31. Her intercession protects the promised line and stabilizes succession. Often remembered for scandal, she also embodies wise advocacy that safeguards covenant purposes. The scene shows palace influence used for faithfulness, not intrigue, maternal diplomacy aligning leadership with God's earlier word. Question 12. Who despised David's dancing before the Lord? A. Michal, B. Vashti, C. Delilah, D. Jezebel. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Michal. Seeing David celebrate as the ark enters Jerusalem, Michal scorns him from a window. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 16-23. Their confrontation contrasts two visions of honor, royal decorum versus humble, God-centered joy. The narrative warns that cynicism can sterilize worship. Dignity without devotion empties celebration of glory. Michal's barrenness bookends the episode, signaling the cost of pride when God's presence is at stake. Question 13. Which queen tried to wipe out the Davidic line? A. Makkah, B. Vashti, C. Athaliah, D. Esther. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Athaliah. After her son's death, Athaliah seizes power and kills royal heirs. 2 Kings chapter 11 verses 1 to 3. Jehosheba hides infant Joash with Jehoiada the priest, preserving the covenant line. Years later, a daring coronation topples the usurper. The episode spotlights quiet female courage behind the scenes and God's fidelity to his promise despite political terror, royal survival resting on temple faithfulness and hidden nurture. Question 14. Who negotiated peace from Abel Beth Makkah and saved her city? A. Naomi, B. Wise woman of Abel, C. Huldah, D. Wise woman of Tekoa. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Wise woman of Abel. A wise woman calls to Joab, argues for the city's faithfulness, and proposes surrendering Sheba to end the siege. 2 Samuel chapter 20 verses 16 to 22. Her diplomacy spares countless lives, proving that prudence in speech can do what swords can't. The narrative elevates community-saving wisdom, female, local, practical, within the politics of kings, reminding readers that God often preserves his people through peacemakers with clear heads and steady voices. Question 15. Which widow hosted Elijah and saw that flour and oil never ran out? A. Tamar, B. Rizpah, C. Widow of Nain, D. Widow of Zarephath. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Widow of Zarephath. In famine, the Phoenician widow gives her last meal to Elijah by God's word. The jar and jug then prove inexhaustible. 1 Kings chapter 17 verses 8 to 16. The miracle sustains a Gentile household and the prophet, previewing God's border-breaking mercy. Her obedience amid scarcity models faith that acts before surplus appears, trusting promise over pantry. Daily provision, not luxury, becomes a living parable of covenant care. Question 16. Who prepared a room for Elisha and later saw her son raised? A. Widow of Zarephath, B. Delilah, C. Shunammite woman, D. Jezebel. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Shunammite woman. A notable woman of Shunem builds a prophet's room. Elisha promises a son, who later dies and is restored. Her determined faith, saddling up, refusing dismissal, clinging to God's agent, turns grief into testimony. Hospitality becomes holy ground where resurrection breaks into an ordinary home, showing that honoring God's work invites surprises far beyond the gift we first intended. 2 Kings chapter 4 verses 8 to 37. Question 17. Who hid her infant and set him in a basket on the Nile? A. Jochebed, B. Zipporah, C. Shiphrah, D. Miriam. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Jochebed. Facing infanticide, Jochebed conceals her baby for 3 months, then crafts a waterproof basket and entrusts him to the river while Miriam watches nearby. Courage and creativity meet providence as the child is preserved for God's future purposes. Maternal faith becomes the first human link in Israel's great deliverance, reminding us that quiet, risky obedience often launches history-shaping missions. Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 to 4. Question 18. Who drew the baby from the Nile and named him Moses? A. Bethiah, B. Asenath, C. Hatshepsut, D. Pharaoh's daughter. You get 10 seconds. That's D. Pharaoh's daughter. Moved by compassion, the princess rescues the Hebrew child, unknowingly hires his own mother to nurse him, and later names him Moses, drawn out. Her act subverts genocidal policy from within the palace and positions Moses for bilingual, bicultural leadership. God weaves deliverance through unexpected kindness and royal resources, rescue arising in the very house that ordered death. Exodus chapter 2, verses 5 to 10. Question 19. Who averted disaster by circumcising her son and touching Moses' feet? A. Rachel, B. Zipporah, C. Keturah, D. Jochebed. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Zipporah. On the road, covenant neglect brings lethal jeopardy. Zipporah performs the overdue circumcision and halts judgment. The strange scene highlights God's holiness and the primacy of covenant signs before public ministry. Zipporah's decisive, costly obedience preserves Moses and realigns their household with Abrahamic identity, faithfulness starting at home before confronting Pharaoh abroad. Exodus chapter 4, verses 24 to 26. Question 20. Who betrayed Samson by arranging the shaving of his hair? A. Jael, B. Michal, C. Delilah, D. Athaliah. You get 10 seconds. That's C. Delilah. After persistent pressure, Delilah extracts Samson's secret, lulls him to sleep, and summons the razor. Strength departs. The Philistines seize, blind, and bind him. Her role exposes how seduction and greed can dismantle a consecrated life when vows are treated lightly. The tragedy cautions against divided hearts and confidences traded for silver. Judges chapter 16, verses 18 to 21. Stay to the finish, tally your score, and post it below to join the leaderboard. Which question was your toughest? Let's learn together and sharpen each other. Question 21. Which queen refused the king's summons during a banquet? A. Esther, B. Vashti, C. Jezebel, D. Maacah. You get 10 seconds. That's B, Vashti. At a 7-day feast, Vashti declines to be displayed before intoxicated nobles. Her refusal, costly and controversial, reshapes the court and opens the narrative space for Esther's rise. The episode critiques power's vanity and hints that moral boundary keeping, even by a pagan queen, can check imperial excess. Providence often begins with a no that makes room for a better yes. Esther chapter 1, verses 10 to 12. Question 22. Who guarded the exposed bodies of Saul's sons, keeping birds and beasts away? A. Rizpah. B. Michal. C. Abigail. D. Merab. You get 10 seconds. That's A. Rizpah. Rizpah spreads sackcloth on a rock and keeps vigil from harvest until rain, refusing to let the dead be further dishonored. Her stubborn grief prompts David to gather the bones of Saul and Jonathan and bury them properly, ending a national famine. A marginalized mother's lament becomes moral protest that nudges a king toward justice. 2 Samuel chapter 21, verses 10 to 14. Question 23. Who, coached by Joab, used a parable to move David toward reconciling with Absalom? A. Tamar. B. Huldah. C. Wise woman of Abel. D. Wise woman of Tekoa. You get 10 seconds. That's D, Wise Woman of Tekoa. Acting as a storyteller advocate, she presents a fictional case that mirrors David's estrangement, softening the king's heart and securing Absalom's return. Her rhetorical skill reveals the power of wisdom and narrative to heal royal paralysis. Though politics remain messy, her intervention models female diplomacy that seeks restoration over revenge. 2 Samuel chapter 14, verses 1 to 20. Question 24. Who hid the infant Joash from the murderous queen? A. Jehoiada. B. Jehosheba. C. Jezebel. D. Athaliah. You get 10 seconds. That's B. Jehosheba. Jehosheba, sister of King Ahaziah and wife of priest Jehoiada, secretly rescued baby Joash from Athaliah's purge and hid him in the temple for 6 years. 2 Kings chapter 11, verses 2 to 3. Her quick courage and priestly partnership preserved David's line until a rightful coronation. The episode shows how quiet fidelity behind the scenes can secure God's promises when public power turns violent, and how the temple became refuge and resistance. Question 25. Who traveled to test Solomon with hard questions? A. Jezebel. B. Vashti. C. Queen of Sheba. D. Bathsheba. You get 10 seconds. That's C, Queen of Sheba. Drawn by reports of Solomon's wisdom, the Queen of Sheba arrives with questions, treasures, and keen observation. 1 Kings chapter 10 verses 1 to 9. Hearing his answers and seeing his ordered kingdom, she blesses Israel's God for seating a just king. Her visit frames wisdom as a public good, righteousness, prosperity, and worship interwoven. A foreign ruler's praise previews the nation streaming to God's light through Israel's faithful rule. Outstanding! You made it to the end. From Deborah's leadership to Ruth's loyal love, from Esther's brave petition to Huldah's authoritative word, these women show how God advances his story through steadfast faith and wise action. As it says in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 26, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. If this blessed you, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell us your score, the heroine who surprised you most, and which story you'll revisit this week. Thank you for learning with us. Until next time, be bold in faith, generous in wisdom, and faithful in obedience. God be with you.